In the peaceful village of Katembo, everyone knew Nalia for her gentle heart and her wonderful cooking. Every morning before the sun rose, she lit her small fire near her hut and began to prepare food. The smell of her stew, roasted maize, and soft bread filled the air and made people gather around. Farmers stopped by before going to the fields, children came running with coins in their hands, and even travelers passing through the village always asked, "Where is the woman who cooks like sunshine?" Nalia's secret was not magic, it was love. She cooked with care, using clean water from the stream, fresh vegetables from her small garden, and spices her late mother had taught her to mix. As she stirred the pot, she often hummed an old song, the same one her mother used to sing. The people said her food could make even a sad man smile. But one day something changed. In the corner of the marketplace sat an old woman named Mama Kasai. She was known for gossiping and she was jealous that no one bought her food anymore. Her stall had once been full, but after Nalia came, everyone went to her instead. Mama Kasai sat watching Nalia, her eyes filled with envy. "How can her food taste so good?" she muttered. "It cannot be normal." That night, she went to her neighbor's house and whispered, "Do you know why Nalia's food is so delicious? They say she uses water from the graveyard well." The neighbor gasped and said, "Graveyard water? That is evil." Mama Kasai nodded and replied, "Yes. I heard it from someone who saw her walking near the graves at night." By morning, the rumor had already spread like wildfire. People whispered as Nalia passed. Women pointed and pulled their children away. The men at the well stopped talking when she came to fetch water. Even her best friend, Amina, looked unsure when Nalia tried to greet her. At first, Nalia laughed softly, thinking it was a small joke that would soon fade away. But as the days went by, her customers stopped coming. Her fire burned, but no one came near her food stall. She sat alone, stirring the pot quietly, hoping someone would come, but no one did. Children began to mock her. "Corpse cook! Corpse cook!" they shouted, running past her hut. Nalia's eyes filled with tears, and she could not understand why people believed such lies. That night she sat by the fire, her heart heavy. The stars above looked far away, and the night wind carried whispers that hurt more than stones. The next morning she decided to go to the village chief. She walked slowly, holding her head high even though her heart trembled. When she reached the chief's hut, she bowed respectfully and said, "Chief, I have done nothing wrong. I only cook with clean water and honest hands. Why do my people now call me a woman of darkness?" The chief looked at her kindly but with worry. "Nalia," he said, "the people are afraid. The rumor is strong and fear is a stubborn thing. You must bring proof of your truth." "Proof?" she asked softly. "How can I prove that I do not do what I have never done?" The chief sighed. "Do not lose hope," he said. "The truth always finds its way, but sometimes it must walk slowly." Nalia thanked him and left. As she walked home, she saw Mama Kasai watching her from her stall with a small smile. Nalia felt anger rise inside her but quickly let it go. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Never fight lies with hate. Let your heart speak louder." That night, she sat by her empty pots and prayed for strength. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had fed children and comforted the hungry, and whispered, "One day they will see the truth." But deep down, fear began to grow. What if they never believed her? What if her name was forever tied to the graves and ghosts they spoke of? She closed her eyes and listened to the quiet crackle of her dying fire, knowing that the world she had known was beginning to change. The next morning she woke up early as always. The sun rose golden over Katembo, painting the sky with hope. Though her heart ached, she lit her fire again. The smoke curled into the air, carrying the smell of her cooking, the same sweet smell that once brought smiles. But this time no one came. She sat alone, stirring the pot, waiting for a miracle she did not yet see coming. Little did she know her story was just beginning. The same hands they doubted would soon prove stronger than every lie told against her. The sun rose slowly over Katembo, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The morning breeze carried the scent of smoke and fresh soil. Nalia sat beside her small cooking fire as she did every morning. The pot simmered softly and the smell of stew filled the air, rich, warm, and inviting. But this time no footsteps came. No laughter, no greetings, no children rushing with coins in their hands. The road that was once busy with people eager to taste her food was now empty. She stirred the pot quietly, hoping someone would come. "Maybe they are late today," she whispered to herself, forcing a small smile. But deep down she knew something had changed. The laughter she heard from a distance was not joyful. It was sharp and cruel. "Look, there she is, the corpse cook," one of the children shouted from behind a tree. The others laughed, their voices echoing through the morning air. Nalia froze. Her hands trembled, and for a moment she could not move. She wanted to shout to tell them it was not true, but the words caught in her throat. The children ran away, still laughing. Her heart ached. The same children she used to feed for free now mocked her. Even her neighbors, who once greeted her warmly, looked away when she passed. A woman selling fruits near her stall whispered to another, "She used grave water. That is why her food smells strange." The other woman nodded quickly, clutching her basket as if fear itself sat inside it. Nalia sat in silence for a long time. The fire burned low and the stew grew cold. She lifted the spoon to taste it, still delicious just like always. Tears filled her eyes. "What did I do wrong?" she whispered. "Why do they hate me for feeding them?" She decided to go to the village chief. Maybe he would help her. Maybe he would tell the people to stop believing lies. She covered her pot and walked slowly through the market road. People stepped aside as she passed, whispering behind her. Her feet felt heavy and her eyes stayed low. When she reached the chief's compound, she bowed respectfully and waited. The chief, an old man with kind eyes, looked at her and sighed. "Nalia," he said, "I know why you are here. The people have spoken." "I have done nothing wrong," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "They say I use water from the graves, but I only take from the stream. You know me, chief. I feed the poor, I share what I have. Why do they believe lies?" The chief rubbed his chin and looked at the ground. "The people are afraid, Nalia," he said gently. "When fear enters a man's heart, reason leaves it. They think your food is too good to be natural. You must bring proof that what they say is false." Nalia blinked in disbelief. "Proof?" she asked. "How do I prove something I have never done?" The chief sighed again. "Sometimes truth must be shown, not spoken. If you can show them your water, your fire, your heart, they may listen." She nodded slowly, though her heart sank. She thanked him and walked home. The road seemed longer that day. Every whisper, every stare felt like a knife. When she reached her hut, she sat by her empty stall. The pot of stew sat untouched. Flies buzzed around it. She poured it away, her tears falling into the dust. As the sun set, Nalia lit a small lamp and sat outside, staring into the distance. The crickets sang and the night wind blew softly against her face. "How fast lies run," she murmured, "and how slow truth walks." She remembered her mother's voice from long ago, saying, "When people fear what they do not understand, kindness becomes a crime." She leaned her head against the wall of her hut and cried quietly. She thought of the children who once smiled at her, of the women who praised her food, of the men who brought their families to eat under the big tree. All of it was gone, lost to gossip. The next morning she tried again. She woke before sunrise and prepared her stew, even though her heart felt heavy. She cleaned her stall and lit her fire, the smoke rising into the brightening sky. Hours passed but no one came. Only the sound of goats and the rustling wind filled the air. At noon a small boy came running, clutching a coin. Nalia's face brightened. "You came for food?" she asked gently. The boy nodded, but when his mother saw him, she rushed over and pulled him away. "Don't eat from her," the woman shouted. "Do you want to be cursed?" The boy dropped the coin and ran, frightened. Nalia bent down, picked up the coin and looked at it for a long time. Then she placed it beside her pot. "Maybe one day he will come back," she said softly. That evening her friend Amina came to visit. She stood at a distance, not daring to come closer. "Nalia," she said quietly, "the people say they saw you near the graveyard at night." Nalia looked up in shock. "I was fetching herbs for my mother's grave," she said. "You know I go there every full moon. It is to clean her resting place, not to take anything." Amina looked torn. "I believe you," she whispered, "but others will not. Be careful. They are talking about bringing the elders to question you." Nalia's heart pounded. "Elders? To question me?" she asked. Amina nodded sadly and walked away. That night, Nalia could not sleep. The fear in her heart grew stronger. The moonlight fell softly on her face as she whispered to herself, "If truth is slow, I will walk with it. I will not hide." The next morning she took her pot, her spoon and her small clay jar of water. She looked at the sky and said quietly, "If they want proof, they will have it." Then she began to walk toward the marketplace, where the people gathered every morning. Her heart was still trembling, but her steps were firm. She was ready to face whatever waited, because she knew that the truth, no matter how small, was stronger than 1,000 lies. The sun had almost gone down when Cato knocked on Nalia's door. His hands were rough from farm work, and his shirt was dusty from the fields. but his eyes were gentle. When Nalia opened the door, he saw her face, tired, swollen from tears, yet still strong in its sadness. "Nalia," he said softly, stepping closer, "I heard what they are saying." She looked down, ashamed. "Then you must also believe them," she whispered. Cato shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "I know you. I have eaten your food since we were children. Your hands are clean, your heart is clean." He paused and then added, "But people need to see, not just hear. Let them watch you cook. Let them see the truth with their own eyes." Nalia looked up at him, hope flickering like a candle in her chest. "Do you really think that will help?" He nodded. "The truth is quiet, but when it stands in light, even lies must hide." That night, Nalia could not sleep. She sat by her cold fire, thinking about Cato's words. Outside, the night was silent except for the sound of crickets and the distant call of an owl. The moonlight fell on her clay pot and her small jar of water, the same one she had used for years. She ran her fingers along its rim and whispered, "Tomorrow they will see. I have nothing to hide." When dawn came, she woke early. The air was cool and the morning sky glowed softly. She cleaned her cooking stand and gathered her pots, firewood, and the fresh vegetables she had grown herself. Cato met her outside her hut, carrying a bundle of maize and smiling kindly. "Let's go," he said. They walked to the center of the village, the same place where the market and meetings were held. Word spread quickly that Nalia was coming. People left their homes, whispering and pointing. By the time she reached the square, a large crowd had gathered. Some came out of curiosity, others out of suspicion. Even the chief sat beneath the old tree watching silently. Nalia stood in the open space, her hands shaking slightly. But when she saw Cato standing nearby, nodding in quiet support, she felt strength return to her heart. She raised her head and said clearly, "I have been accused of using the water of the dead. Today I will cook for you all with the same hands and the same heart I have always used. Watch me. Judge for yourselves." She took a small clay pot from her basket and poured clean water into it, water fetched from the stream that morning. "This," she said, holding it high, "is from the river where your children play. The same water you drink." The people murmured, watching her every move. Nalia lit the fire. The dry wood crackled and smoke curled into the air. She added oil, onions, tomatoes, and spices. The sound of sizzling filled the square, and slowly a rich, mouth-watering aroma began to spread. For a moment even the whispers stopped. The familiar smell of her stew floated across the crowd, bringing back memories of laughter, of market days, of shared meals under the tree. Cato smiled quietly and said to the people, "Look well. She hides nothing." The chief leaned forward, watching carefully as Nalia stirred the pot. Her movements were steady and calm. She added chopped vegetables, maize, and a handful of beans, all while the villagers whispered among themselves. "She's not using anything strange," one man said softly. "It's just the same way she always cooks," another replied. "But her food, it's different. It tastes too good," a woman said suspiciously. Nalia looked up and said gently, "It tastes good because it is made with love, not with fear." After an hour, the stew was ready. The smell filled every corner of the square. Cato fetched small bowls and Nalia began to serve. "Let the chief taste first," someone said, and everyone agreed. Nalia walked to the chief and bowed respectfully, offering the bowl with both hands. He looked at her for a long moment before taking it. The crowd held its breath as he lifted the spoon to his mouth. He tasted once, then again. His eyes softened. "It is good," he said simply. "The same as before." The crowd murmured. Some still looked doubtful, but others began to step forward. "Let me taste too," said one of the women who had mocked her before. Soon more villagers came. They ate quietly, glancing at one another. The food was warm, rich, and comforting, the same familiar taste they had missed. Finally, an old man stood and said, "If this is the work of graves, then let the dead feed us every day." The crowd broke into laughter, some uneasy, some genuine. For the first time in weeks, Nalia smiled. But even as laughter spread, she noticed a few faces still clouded with doubt. She could see the old woman who had started the rumor standing at the back, frowning deeply. Nalia's smile faded slightly, but she said nothing. She had shown the truth. What people chose to believe was beyond her control. As the sun began to set, the villagers slowly left, talking among themselves. Some apologized quietly, others stayed silent. The chief called Nalia forward once more. "You have done well," he said. "You have faced fear with courage. Let this day be remembered." When everyone left, only Cato and Nalia remained in the square. The fire had burned low and the pot was almost empty. Cato picked up the spoon and tasted what was left. "Still the best stew in the village?" he said with a grin. Nalia laughed softly. "Thank you, Cato. Without you, I might have given up." He shrugged. "The truth does not walk alone. It needs someone to open the path." Nalia looked at the fading sky, the orange light bathing the square in warmth. "Maybe," she said, "but the truth still walks slower than lies." Cato nodded. "Yes," he said, "but it never gets lost." That night, as Nalia returned home, she felt lighter. Her heart was still sore but no longer broken. The village had seen her truth. And though not everyone believed it, she had found her peace. She sat beside her fire, the soft crackle filling the silence. Her stew pot gleamed faintly in the firelight. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I will cook again. Not to prove anything, but because it is what I love." The wind carried the scent of her stew through the night, gentle and familiar, as if the village itself was slowly remembering who she truly was. The morning sun shone brightly over Katembo as the villagers gathered once more in the square. This time the air was heavy with curiosity, not anger. Nalia stood before them, her heart beating fast but steady. She had prepared everything carefully, the clean pot, the fresh vegetables, and the bucket of water from the village stream. Cato stood beside her, giving quiet courage with his calm smile. Nalia took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. She looked around at the faces of the people, faces she had fed, laughed with, and cared for. Now those same faces were waiting to judge her. The chief sat under the large tree, his eyes firm but not unkind. He gave her a small nod, a signal to begin. She bent down, poured the water into her pot, and spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "This water," she said, "comes from the stream that flows past the fields. You all drink from it. There is no secret. There is no grave." The villagers watched in silence as she washed her vegetables in front of them. Carrots, maize, onions, and a few leaves of spinach. The knife in her hand gleamed in the sunlight as she chopped each one carefully. Every slice, every sound felt louder than usual. The crowd was tense, waiting for something strange to happen, something they could point to and say, "Ah, that's her trick." But nothing did. Cato kept the fire burning strong while Nalia added oil to the pot. The crackle of the hot oil broke the silence, followed by the soft hiss of onions frying. The smell began to rise, rich, warm, and comforting. It drifted through the crowd like a gentle breeze. Even the children, who had been whispering and giggling before, stopped and sniffed the air. The smell reminded everyone of better days, of market mornings, of weddings, of laughter around shared meals. Nalia added tomatoes, stirring slowly. Then came the beans and maize. She moved with grace, explaining each step as she worked. "See," she said softly, "no magic, no secret. Just what my mother taught me, patience, love, and clean hands." Some of the villagers began to shift uncomfortably. The guilt of their accusations hung heavy in the air. The old woman who had started the rumor watched from a distance, her arms folded. She said nothing, but her face grew tight. As the food cooked, Nalia kept stirring. The scent deepened, thick and rich with spice and smoke. The fire cracked and danced beneath the pot. Every now and then, Cato added a piece of wood to keep the flames alive. The sun climbed higher and sweat ran down Nalia's forehead, but she did not stop. She was not just cooking, she was reclaiming her name, her peace, her dignity. The chief watched carefully. He said nothing, but his eyes followed her every move. When the stew finally began to bubble, the smell was almost impossible to resist. The villagers whispered again, but this time their voices were softer, full of wonder, not fear. "She's doing it the same way as always," a woman murmured. "I can't smell anything bad," another said. "Just delicious." Someone else laughed quietly. "Maybe we were fools." When the food was ready, Nalia lifted the pot from the fire and placed it on a flat stone. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked toward the chief. "It is done," she said. The chief nodded and motioned for her to bring it closer. Nalia scooped a spoonful into a small clay bowl and handed it to him with both hands. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath as he took the first bite. For a long moment he did not speak. Then his eyes softened and a smile crept across his face. "This," he said, "is pure. Just as before." A murmur of relief spread through the crowd. Some people clapped, others laughed nervously as if waking from a bad dream. The chief stood and held up his hand. "The food is clean and so is Nalia's heart," he said. "Let no one speak against her again." Cato grinned widely, his eyes bright with pride. "I told you," he said to those near him. Truth always wins even if it cooks slowly. The people began to come forward, asking for a taste. Nalia smiled shyly and handed out small portions to anyone who asked. One woman who had refused to speak to her for weeks took a bite and closed her eyes. "Oh, Nalia," she said softly, "I had forgotten how good your food is." Another man who had once shouted at her in the market stepped forward. He looked ashamed. "Forgive us," he said. "We were afraid, and fear makes people cruel." Nalia looked at him, her face calm. "You do not need my forgiveness," she said gently. "Only my food, and maybe your kindness next time." The crowd laughed warmly. Even the children joined in, dancing around the fire. Someone shouted, "Forgive us, Nalia," and the others echoed, "Forgive us." Their laughter filled the square, light and bright, chasing away the dark cloud that had hung over them for so long. Nalia's heart swelled with emotion. She had not expected joy to return so quickly, but as she watched the villagers eat and smile, she felt something deep within her heal. The shame that had clung to her name began to fade. Cato handed her a bowl of her own stew. "You should taste it too," he said. She laughed softly. "I've been smelling it so long I almost forgot to eat." They sat together under the tree as the people continued to eat. The chief's wife came to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have taught us something today," she said kindly. "Fear feeds lies, but patience feeds truth." Nalia nodded quietly. Sometimes the heart needs to see what the eyes already know. As the day went on, the people helped clean the square. The children carried empty bowls and the men put out the fire. When everything was done, Nalia stood at the center looking around. The same people who had turned away from her were now smiling, waving, thanking her. Even the old woman who had started the rumor stood still for a long time, her eyes downcast. Finally, she walked up to Nalia and whispered, "I am sorry." Nalia looked at her, then smiled softly. "The past cannot be cooked again," she said. "Let's just start fresh." The woman nodded slowly and walked away. When the sun began to set, the golden light touched the roofs of the huts, and the square glowed with warmth. Nalia packed her pots and baskets, her heart light for the first time in weeks. The villagers called out their goodbyes, promising to come to her stall the next day. As she walked home, Cato walked beside her. The path was quiet except for the chirping of evening crickets. "You see," he said gently, "truth always finds a way." Nalia smiled, her voice calm and full of peace. "Yes," she said, "and now the village can eat without fear." The two friends walked on, the smell of stew still floating behind them, wrapping the village once again in warmth and forgiveness. The morning after the great cooking in the village square, Katembo woke up with a different feeling in the air. It was quiet but peaceful, like the village had taken a deep breath after a long storm. Birds sang on the rooftops, and the smell of fresh stew drifted from Nalia's small stall again. For the first time in many days, people walked by without fear or whispers. Some even smiled at her. Nalia sat behind her fire, stirring her pot with calm hands. She had not forgotten the pain of being called names, but her heart no longer felt heavy. She had shown them the truth, and that truth had spoken louder than any rumor ever could. The same villagers who once crossed the road to avoid her were now returning, one by one. The first customer to come that morning was a young boy named Juma. He had been one of the children who teased her, shouting "corpse cook" in the streets. Now he stood before her stall, his head lowered. "Mama Nalia," he said softly, "can I buy some stew?" Nalia looked at him, her eyes kind. "Of course, my boy," she said. "But only if you promise to eat with a clean heart." Juma nodded quickly, smiling in relief. He handed her a few coins and watched as she filled his bowl. When he tasted the stew, his eyes lit up. "It's even better than before," he said. "You cook like the sun shines, warm and bright." Nalia laughed gently. "Maybe that's because my heart feels warm again," she said. By midday, her stall was surrounded. The same men and women who once turned their backs on her now came with open hands and hungry stomachs. Some brought small gifts, maize, cassava, even a few coins, to show their thanks. Others came just to talk, their voices full of regret. One woman, Amina, who had spread the rumor without thinking, came forward with tears in her eyes. "I don't know why I believed those words," she said. "I was jealous, Nalia. Everyone loved your food and I wanted the same." Nalia wiped her hands on her cloth and looked at her kindly. "Jealousy is like salt," she said. "A little can make things taste good, but too much can spoil everything." Amina laughed through her tears. "Then I will try to use less salt in my heart," she said, and the two women hugged, their laughter mixing with the sound of the bubbling stew. As the days passed, more people came not just from Katembo but from nearby villages. They had heard the story of the woman who had been wrongly accused, and how she faced it not with anger but with courage and patience. Some came to taste her cooking, others came to see her spirit. Nalia never bragged or spoke proudly of what happened. She simply cooked, smiled, and thanked every customer. When asked how she had found the strength to forgive, she would say, "The fire that cooks food also teaches patience. If you rush it, the food burns. If you wait, it becomes sweet." One afternoon, the old woman who had started the rumor came to see her. Her back was bent and her steps were slow. The crowd went quiet when they saw her approach. Everyone knew who she was. The old woman stopped in front of Nalia's stall, clutching a small basket of fruit. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Child," she said, "I was wrong. I let envy speak for me. My tongue caused you pain. Please forgive me." Nalia looked at her for a long moment. The village waited, expecting anger or at least a few hard words. But Nalia's voice was soft when she finally spoke. "Words can hurt," she said gently, "but truth always heals. You have already taken the first step by speaking yours." The old woman began to cry, and Nalia reached out to hold her hand. "Come," she said. "Sit. Eat with me. Let's make peace over food." The crowd murmured in amazement as Nalia served her a bowl of stew. The old woman tasted it, her lips trembling. "This food has more love than spice," she whispered. "You are a good woman, Nalia." From that day forward, the rumor truly died. No one spoke of corpse water again. Instead, they spoke of Nalia's kindness, her forgiveness, and her food that carried the taste of home and healing. Weeks later, a trader passing through Katembo stopped by her stall. After tasting her food, he said, "You should open a big kitchen in the town. People will come from far away to eat what you make." Nalia smiled. "The town already has many cooks," she said. "But my village still needs warmth." Still, she began to grow. With Cato's help, she built a bigger stall, added more dishes, and even taught young girls how to cook. "Your hands," she told them, "are your tools. But your heart is the real fire." The girls listened carefully, learning not just to cook but to care. They learned how to mix ingredients with love, how to stay calm when the fire burned too high, and how to smile even when the pot took too long to boil. Soon, Nalia's kitchen became famous beyond Katembo. Travelers would stop to eat and ask for her story. She never told it with pride or bitterness. She told it simply, like a recipe, each part measured with honesty and peace. "Once," she would begin, "people said I cooked with grave water. But the truth is I only cooked with patience, and patience always wins in the end." Those who heard her story would nod and smile, carrying her words like a quiet lesson in their hearts. One evening, as the sun went down and the market grew silent, Cato came to sit beside her. They watched the orange sky fade into purple, the smell of food still hanging in the air. "You've changed this village, Nalia," Cato said softly. "Not with power but with peace." Nalia looked at him and smiled. "Food can fill the stomach," she said, "but kindness fills the soul." He nodded, and they sat quietly, listening to the night sounds, the soft buzz of insects, the laughter of children, and the crackle of the fire. As stars appeared above them, Nalia closed her eyes and whispered, "Truth always finds its way home, just like the smell of good food." And from that night on, the people of Katembo never doubted her again. Her name became a symbol of trust, her food a reminder of forgiveness, and her story a light for anyone who had ever been wronged. Years later, when strangers came asking where to find the best stew in the region, the villagers would smile and point to the same small stall under the big tree, saying, "There, that's Nalia's place. She doesn't just feed your hunger, she heals your heart." And so, Nalia's flame never went out. It burned gently like her spirit, steady, warm, and bright enough to keep the whole village glowing.